Okay, welcome to the Royal Power in Medieval Europe slidecast. This was created for Global History and Geography, the freshman class. What we've discussed so far about medieval Europe is feudalism, which is a political and social system based on an agreement between lord and vassal. We have also discussed why feudalism happened, because feudalism provided protection for people and social stability. Remember, feudalism is formed in the time after the fall of the Roman Empire. So protection and stability were important since there no longer was the Roman government to do that in Europe. Monarchs or kings still existed, but they existed with little or in some cases no power. The real power in feudalism, remember, were the lords, and the most powerful lords, the noble lords. I'm going to show you a map right here. On this map, there are two major countries that we're going to talk about today, England and France. Let me highlight France for you so you know where we're talking about. It's in the yellow circle there. It's the southern one. Then there, just north of France, is that body of water called the English Channel. And just north of the English Channel is England. So we're going to talk today first about a man who came from one particular part of France, the part of France that is now highlighted, which is called Normandy. And it's the small northern part of France on the English Channel, as you can see. And the name of this person who came from there is William of Normandy. You might know him as something else, because in 1066, William of Normandy invaded England with his army and conquered England. And because he did that, he's more often called William the Conqueror in history, and that's kind of his nickname, I guess you could say. William the Conqueror, after he defeated England, he did two major things. The first thing he did was he granted fiefs, which remember are pieces of land, to his allies, and he also required all vassals to swear allegiance to him, to be loyal to him. After he conquered England and started governing England, William and his government wrote the Domesday Book, which is basically a census, and a census is just a counting of everything in the kingdom. So that means every piece of land, it means every structure or building, everything. And the purpose of this, and also what it was good for, was that the Domesday Book helped with tax collection. They knew how much tax to collect from different people and what they could collect. The government knew that now. There is also a large tapestry created to celebrate William's victory. If you don't know what a tapestry is, I strongly suggest you look it up online. And you can check out the tapestry, too, of William the Conqueror. It's very large and pretty cool, and they have pictures of it online. Okay, so kings after William died, the kings in England attempted to become more powerful. Let me give you some examples of this. One example is an English king disagreed with the Pope. He disagreed with him over who should be an archbishop in one of the cities in England. Normally, this is a decision the Pope would make. And remember, we have discussed so far that the church was at the center of people's lives and that the Roman Catholic Church was very powerful. And because of this disagreement, the English king lost this disagreement with the Pope, and because of it, the Pope did two things. The Pope excommunicated the king, and the Pope placed England under an interdict. Eventually, this was resolved. Basically, the king apologized and had to do something for the Pope, and the excommunication and the interdict were both removed by the Pope, and England was no longer under an interdict. But there is another example of the English kings trying to become more powerful. English kings attempted to continue raising taxes. And of course, this made the nobles very unhappy. And in this case, The English king lost this disagreement with the nobles over raising taxes, and two things happened. The nobles rose up against the king, and then the nobles forced the king to sign and agree to a document called the Magna Carta, which means the Great Letter Contract. The Magna Carta, let me tell you what's in this that's very important. The Magna Carta states several things. First thing is that nobles have certain rights. Later, in England, all people would be given rights. But here, the document agrees that nobles do have rights. The second thing is that the monarch, must obey the law. This means that the king is not above the law, and the king cannot change the law if they wish to whenever they feel like it. They are not above it. They must obey it. The third thing is that the Magna Carta said people have a right of, and this is a very important term, habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means, having this right means that people cannot be imprisoned without being charged. What was happening in England and around Europe and many other places in the world at this time is that if the king didn't like somebody or disagreed with somebody or for any reason at all, the king could put someone in prison and they could just stay there and they could stay there for a long time and they would never be charged with committing a crime because maybe they hadn't. Habeas corpus makes it possible for that not to happen. If you are put in prison now in England because of the Magna Carta, people had to be charged with a crime. No crime, you couldn't be in prison. The fourth thing is the monarch could not raise taxes without consulting the Great Council, and it later became called Parliament. You've probably heard of Parliament today. Parliament's made up of a group of English citizens, and that's what it was back then as well. They were nobles. The monarch could not raise taxes anymore without consulting with the Great Council or Parliament, who were made up of the nobles. Therefore, what happens here in England because of this Magna Carta is that the English form of government becomes called a limited monarchy. And what a limited monarchy means is that the power of the monarch, or the king and queen, is limited by another group. And in this case, the limiting is coming from Parliament. They limited the power, Parliament limited the power of the king because the king cannot do whatever they would like. This is what was happening in England. Much shorter explanation of what was going on in France. Outside of England and in France, during the time when feudalism was very powerful in France, you can see on the scale here that the church and the nobles have more power and the monarchs have little power, like we said earlier. What happens over time in France is that some things begin to change. French monarchs took away the power from the nobles and took away the power from the Pope in many ways. The French monarchs were trying to make people loyal to them and not to the nobles or to the church. Basically, the French kings were trying to do the same thing that the English kings were doing, except that the French kings were successful and were able to make a shift in power with the decline of feudalism, meaning that with feudalism declining, the church and the nobles' power decreased, as you can see here, and the power of the monarch increased. That's all I have for right now. I hope you enjoyed this. You can watch it as many times as you'd like. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on Edmodo. Bye-bye.